Welcome everybody. I see a lot of faces who have been with us many times, and I see a lot of new faces too. So, welcome to Zen Peacemakers. And if you can help support us at the website, that's always appreciated. Become a member. Get on the mailing list. Membership is free, but you'll be able to get notification about what we're doing in the future, and you can join us again. For those that don't know, my name is Jeff O'Keefe. I am the titular executive director of Zen Peacemakers, and I've been looking forward to this day for a long time. I told Peter I've been chasing him down for 3 years, and we finally connected. We finally got it together, and then and we were on the calendar for what, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, Peter. And Peter did something to his eye, and we had to reschedule. So, but here we are, and just so long as the internet doesn't crash or the creek don't rise, I think we're gonna be just fine. Um, I don't. You didn't come to hear me, but I wanted just a brief introduction. You're all here because you know Peter. You know of Peter. Um, when you if you pull him up on Wikipedia, you'll see a body of work that I think is nearly unrivaled. It's unbelievable. I didn't count the films, but it's a page or two.
It's 160.
160. You did count them because you did them all.
Two ex-wives and alimony.
I didn't count the the narrations. But Peter probably knows how many he's done the voice of. It's gotten to the point where I've seen Peter or heard Peter so many times with Ken Burns and other PBS events that if it's not Peter's voice, I don't believe that it's necessarily true. It's gotten to that point. But as we were chatting just a minute ago, and he'll tell you this too, he started out.
Oh, come on.
Please, everybody mute. He started out as, and still considers himself mainly a writer. And I heartily encourage you, if you have not, to read his two memoirs, Sleeping Where I Fall, and then he followed with The Rain Man's Third Cure. And they go together so beautifully, and they complement one another, and you really get an intimate look into Peter's life, but it also into our time. And then more recently, Zen in the Vernacular just came out, and Peter's book of poetry called Tongue of a Crow. So there's the shameless plug for reading Peter's words. So I'm going to mute myself now and pass the $50 microphone over to Peter and let him take over and share with us about activity and stillness, how to avoid becoming the problem that we want to solve. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Peter.
Good morning, everyone. Jeff, thank you for that fulsome introduction. You did overlook the part about how they found me in the bulrushes, but that's for another time, I suppose. So the bad news and the good news. There's no way to avoid being part of the problem. We all began to sit as Buddhists. We all began to study meditation because we had the idea or some intuition that there was a level of intimacy and a level of interconnection and a level of freedom that we imagined and sought. And enlightenment's a pretty good reason. For me, it was like 15-year-old overweight kid, got tongue-tied around girls and just, read about Zen Buddhism and enlightenment and thought, that's it. There's my super cape. There's my superpower. That's what I'm going to do. And of course, there's a problem in that, which you've all uncovered by now, which is that if you have an idea of a self and you have an idea of enlightenment, they're separate, they're not going to come together. So the truth of it is there's two parallel realities, and we're in both of them. For the period that we have this sack of skin, which the ancient Chinese used to call the guest. They call it the guest because it comes and goes. We are stuck in the world of contradictions and opposites and separate identifiable objects, of which we include ourselves among. And then the other side of it, which we've also learned, is that we've never been separate from oxygen. We've never been separate from microbes in the soil. We've never been separate from sunlight. We've never been separate from water. We've never been separate from the people growing the cotton, spinning the cotton, sewing the cotton, putting it on us, all the way out to the Earth's place in space. If the Earth was any closer to the sun, water would fry off. We wouldn't be here. And if it was farther away, it would freeze and we wouldn't be here. And the Earth is being held where it is by all the magnetic forces of the universe. So it's not like those things are there to support our life. Those things are our life. So our life is the sunrise. Our life is the cry of crows. It's not a metaphor. It's actually true. And part of the problem is we forget one or the other. We either tend to take a holistic view and forget about the fact that we have a body and a family to feed, and we sacrifice a lot of stuff to this idea of enlightenment, or we hold on to some idea of personal perfection, as if after enlightenment all of our problems are going to disappear. But that's not the case. Buddha was enlightened, and he suffered publicly when his friend King Bimbisara was executed by his son. He suffered publicly when he had a thorn that got infected in his foot. He suffered when he died from poison mushrooms. So obviously there's some misunderstanding if we think that enlightenment ends all suffering. So I just want to review what the Buddha taught for a minute. The man I mentioned, David Brazier, who wrote this wonderful book called The Feeling Buddha, had a lot of trouble, as I did, understanding the Four Noble Truths. I just didn't know what they had to do with anything. Suffering exists. There's an end to suffering. There's a path to end suffering. I just never got it. So David went back into the Sanskrit and the Pali. And the first thing he understood was that the word dukkha, which Buddha called the first noble truth, as translated by Christian translators, was suffering, but it's not actually an adequate translation, because Buddha told us what dukkha was. In his first Dharma talk, he defined dukkha as being born, dying, illness, grief, physical pain, being locked in situations we don't want to be in, being denied situations that we do want to be in. And so David substitutes the word affliction, which to me is a better word. And it gets us out of the conundrum that maybe somehow we're at fault if we're suffering. We're suffering because we're egocentric. We're suffering because we're attached. In fact, a noble truth, just think about it a second, true means true, and noble means worthy of dignity and respect. So to say that affliction is a noble truth is to say that it's impersonal, that everything exists in a kind of peppered wind. It's the energy that moves things around. If we get too hot, we move away from the fire. If we get too cold, we move closer to the fire. And this affliction just stirs the pot. And it's important to understand you're not experiencing affliction because you're ignorant or because you're stupid or because your practice is bad. It is the condition of all life on earth. The second noble truth is called samudaya, and it means arising. And when we're afflicted, thoughts and feelings arise. Bingo, it's not your fault either. Someone cuts us off in a car, we get a chill of fear, we get anger, we get a response. It's not your fault. It's just like a seesaw. It's a mechanical bing bang. The third noble truth is the first one you can do something about. And it's called Nirodha. And Nirodha means containment, and it has a very particular image for Nepalese people, which was a clay wall that was built around a fire pit in a village to stop the flames and sparks from leaping out and igniting the crops and burning the villages down. And the containment is zazen. The containment is prajnaparamita. The containment is dzogchen. The containment is meditation. And what we learn from meditation is that we can physically contain anything that arises within us. And by doing it over and over again, we develop strength and we develop faith based on experience, not based on belief. You sit zazen, things happen. You get an inner spaciousness. You experience yourself more and more intimately. And based on that experience, you have faith in the practice. So at the point at which you can contain whatever comes up, and why? Because it's not the problem. What arises is not the problem. The problem arises when we run away from grief, when we run away from fear, when we run away from desire. When we run away, that's where we wind up gambling, drugging, winding up in the wrong bed. Sitting still creates no karma. Your karma works on emptiness. So by the time you get some confidence that you can contain what comes up, that's when the fourth noble truth, marga, the eightfold path, exists. And remember, there are no Buddhist cops. What Buddha pointed out was that in a world of dependent origination, where everything is dependent on everything else, there was no such thing as a fixed self. Of course, we have self-awareness, but our awareness doesn't correspond to an organ. You can't find its location within you. You can't find its shape. You can't find its color. So it doesn't exist the way we think it exists, which is actually a great liberation. Because what it is awareness. It's boundaryless, just like the universe. So our deepest, truest nature, that which we call me, I, you, is actually this boundaryless, empty awareness, emptiness. Emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. Emptiness means boundaryless. And boundaryless means that everything is connected. So when we follow the Eightfold Path, as we walk, we can ask ourselves, we can ask our formless inner nature, am I following a Buddhist view? Am I seeing the world from this double-handed Buddhist view? Is my speech Buddhist speech? Am I being helpful? Am I being kind? Is my action like a Buddhist? We don't use the word right. Buddha used right livelihood, right action, right speech. My teacher used Buddhist to say that this is the way we do it, because right connotes wrong in English as well. So anyway, the Eightfold Path is the product of Buddha's enlightenment. And when we walk it and when we practice it assiduously, consulting our inner nature, we are living an enlightened life. Now, you may or you may not have a Kensho experience where your ego gives up for a few minutes. But whether you do or don't is less important than whether you practice. Someone asked Suzuki Roshi about enlightenment, and he said, you might not like it. And when I had my own Kensho experience, that was definitely the case, because it wiped out everything that I had put my faith on in the last 20 years, showed me that it was as empty as everything else. And I was on the verge of despair, actually. And then I realized that Buddha had had the same experience, and that it was the product of his compassion that made him get up and try to teach, even though he doubted the effectiveness of his ability to teach, because what he saw was so subtle. But he did. And then I settled back into the sesshin and resolved my intention to teach and to be helpful. There are people ahead of me that I would learn from. There are people behind me that I would help. Now, why do I give you all this buildup? Because we're living in a kind of hell right now. And it's very stressful to watch the acting out of Buddha's primary teaching, which is that everything changes. Everything is temporary. That means the United States. That means our laws, our legal system. That means the planet we live on. And to the extent that we operate from greed, anger, and delusion, we accelerate those changes. I'm sure for most of the people here, we would settle to be alive and happy on this blue pearl of a planet. Watch the sun come up and watch our kids grow and grow vegetables and be nice with our neighbors. And to some degree, that's a product of privilege. To other degrees, it's a product of the work we've done, sitting, facing a wall, becoming intimate with ourselves. The place that we get in trouble is when we consider ourselves different from the people who believe differently. I don't like the idea that I'm made of precisely the same stuff as Donald Trump, but it's true. He has equal standing to live in this universe as I do. And perhaps if my father had been a racist member of the Ku Klux Klan who goaded my older brother into alcoholism and respected only winners and tough guys and lived by stealing and treachery and deceit, I might have grown up just like Donald Trump. I was luckier. I had a different fate. So one of the things that we have that seems to confuse a lot of people is we think that Donald Trump is an aberration. And he's not an aberration. He's the tip of a spear that's been planted in the ground since 1968. And I want to tell you just a little bit about it. I mean, there are people who object to my speaking about politics a lot. But politics is basically the study of groups and their interactions and their behaviors. And it seems to me that's certainly appropriate for someone who calls himself a Buddhist. So I was a part of the great counterculture in the 1960s. And I was one of those people that was half brilliant and half an idiot, had a lot of good ideas, had the freedom to experiment. It was liberated from concerns of poverty or concerns of school or career. I didn't care about that. I wanted to contribute something to the world, and we thought the United States was in a bad way then. And we set about living communally and practicing, changing our ideas on sexuality, changing our ideas on the relationships between men and women, changing our ideas on the relationship to the earth. I spent a lot of time studying with native people, thought they were the encyclopedias of how to live on this planet and this place. But we also brought with us all our indulgence, all our traumas. We don't think of it today, but the people who came home from World War II had the same amount of PTSD as the people who came back from Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Grenada. And there was a lot about the 40s when I was born and the 50s that was not so pleasant to grow up in. A lot of violence. Boxing was the national sport in the 40s. My dad was an extremely violent man, and he felt that I was probably going to be eaten by the world. I was a little poetic kid and sort of a daydreamer, and he thought it was his job to toughen me up. Kind of a mistake for a kid like me. It took me a long time to a long time to work out my relationships to violence. And anyway, the United States responded to our experiments and our confidence and our braggadocio and our indulgences by electing Ronald Reagan governor and Richard Nixon president. We'd gotten over our skis. We forgot that the rest of the world wasn't a bunch of young kids free of responsibility, maybe born of wealth or at least enough wealth to be independent. I overlooked the farm people that I grew up with, kind of really conservative people, but basically decent, hardworking. And they slapped us down. And what began was a long career of take back. And in 1969, Lewis Powell, who became a Supreme Court justice appointed by Richard Nixon, Lewis Powell wrote a letter to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's called the Powell Memorandum. You can read it. You can Google it and read it. It's about 30 pages. And he laid out a blueprint for free enterprise and private capital to take back authority. And he outlined a procedure that the Republican Party has followed in lockstep for the last 50 years. Building think tanks with television, radio stations in them, using your clout as a sponsor to demand that television stations laud the contributions of free enterprise, attacking faculties for left-wing sociologists, historians, and professors as donors, warning the universities, and making a 360-degree assault on what today they're calling woke. It's not an accident. And it was funded by some of the greatest fortunes in America. Betsy DeVos, Richard Scaife, who's a Mellon, the Koch brothers, Joseph Coors, and they lavished money on this, and they brought it underground. And they've been underground networking right-wing evangelical churches, Christian nationalists who believe that the founders made a Christian country and only a certain type of Christian should lead, that only certain kinds of people should be in power and the rest should follow. And now it's getting more and more overt. And there's a strain of anti-democratic nihilism, which is quite frightening, because it's not like they want to sit down and discuss things. It's not like if we can just get a few Democrats and a few Republicans to sit down and talk policy, it'll work out. They don't want it to work out. There's a book called Lies, Money, and God by Catherine Stewart. A new book. It's well worth reading. She spent 20 years studying these folks, tracking the interconnections, tracking their politics. And basically, they're all fighting with each other too, but they're all pretty much agreed that they can get richer if there's no democracy. I don't know why they think that way, but they do. So I mention this to tell you that there are huge forces at work, that your anxiety has a purpose. And even my own dad, in the end of my book, Sleeping Where I Fall, my own dad, who used to call me shit for brains, came out to visit our commune in a blizzard of rain, 3-day rain. We were all stuck in the house. There were a bunch of Hell's Angels there. There were 25 adults in a old 19th century farmhouse with a 5-gallon kerosene hot water heater and no electricity. Stuck inside for days. My dad showed up with a case of scotch and 1,000 secanols, barbiturates. And I spent a good part of that time thinking that I was probably going to die fighting to defend my dad, because every time a Hell's Angel got too close to him, he'd call him a fucking faggot and tell him to get away. Anyway, I found him in the kitchen about 11 o'clock at night. He'd been giving barbiturates to the Hells Angels, and they were passed out on either side of him. And he looked up at me, he said, "You're a better man than I am." And I was befuddled. I didn't know what he was talking about, because we were just a hard scrabble, dirt poor commune doing the best we could, living on probably less than $1,500 a year per person. I said, what do you mean, Dad? And he waved his hand. I said, well, this isn't even a dress rehearsal. And he said, no, but you take care of each other and you share what you have. And he was an arch capitalist. This was a guy who was the president of an oil company, a railroad, had his own stock brokerage firm on Wall Street, had 3,000 acres of French cattle he'd smuggled across the Mexican border by painting black spots on them and running them across as Holsteins, because the Angus lobby had, these cows were so great, the Angus lobby forbade them to come in the country. So I said to him, well, how about a little help? Give me some advice, man. I'm tapped out here. And he passed out. It hit the desk, boom. So I just sat there looking at him. He was old and beat up. He'd been a very dangerous, violent guy, black belt in judo, sparring partner of Philadelphia, Jack O'Brien. I'm pulling him out of jail in his 60s for beating guys half his age, senseless. And he suddenly sat up again and he started to talk. And this is what he said. It's almost verbatim. He said, capitalism is dying of its own internal contradictions. And I ought to know I'm one of them. And the sons of bitches who are running it don't care about you or your children or your grandchildren or their own. They've paid their dues and they want to get theirs out of it. They want to hold on until they're dead and keep what's theirs. You think the revolution's going to be in 5 years. He says it's going to take 55 years. And there are huge forces at work. You better keep your head down, look out for the people you love, and hang out for the long cause. This is not going to be an easy deal. It's going to be really bad. They're going to sell off everything that's not nailed down. So I haven't seen anything untrue about that in the last 55, 60 years. That was the winter of 1969 that he said that. It's the last time I saw him alive. So I tell you this to tell you that there's a long train of karma which is besetting us. Now, this woman, Catherine Stewart, shares my opinion that it began shortly after the death of President Kennedy, when the corporate sector flexed its muscle and decided that they were going to use their power to end regulation of the government and control things. And we have an electoral system that's based on money, so everybody has to contend for the money. All compromises are made with the interests of money. Doesn't go the other way. From the day that the Supreme Court said campaign contributions are free speech, all the advantage was thrown to money. And then they doubled down with Citizens United, and they said unlimited money is okay, unlimited anonymous money is okay. So we no longer have any idea of who our Congress is beholden to. The worst people just open their suitcases, take the money. The best, the true public servants, always have to contend, always have to ask themselves, how much can I do in the public interest without risking the money that I need to get elected? And so in that way, all compromises answer to money. So why do I say this? I say this because, first of all, it's important to understand quite clearly and really what's going on. From the point of view of the disenfranchised, urban and rural, non-union workers, Trump's base, the MAGA people, they've been screwed for successive generations. Just overlooked, flyover people. Jimmy Carter's Fed chair, Paul Volcker, raised interest rates 5 points in a single day to demonstrate to the European banks that we were serious about fighting inflation, and wiped out hundreds of thousands of farms in the Midwest, family farms, people who were the recipients of all their heirs, all the labors of their heirs. Farmers are not like us. We get thrown out of the condo, we get another condo. Farmers are living on land that was bequeathed to them by their forebears. And when they lose that land, they are traumatized. And for every 5 farms that went down, you lost a business in a local small town in the Midwest. So they were wiped out. Those farms were bought up by agro-industry. They either went back to work as indentured laborers or they fled to the cities to try to find money. That was a Democrat. There used to be something called the Treaty of Detroit, which was an agreement between labor and industry that as industry profits rose, wages rose. Richard Nixon ended that in 1973. And the first unintended consequence of that was a loss in demand. People said, well, I'll wait. I'll buy my winter coat next year. Or I'll buy this dishwasher next year. I won't buy the car. I'll keep it a little longer. Because the prep school boys didn't think about that. And when demand fell, well, they had a quick solution. Remember in the 70s, you'd come home and you'd have 20 applications for credit cards? That was the solution. 29% interest on credit cards, still legal. Usury, but still legal today. And they got the whole culture hooked on credit to disguise the fact that their wages were going down, that they were losing ground. GATT and NAFTA shifted their jobs out to countries that didn't have health and labor standards, environmental standards, didn't have safety standards. So of course it was cheaper to hire them. So the Midwest got the opioid pandemic, and they got the crystal meth pandemic. They didn't get stable employment. If you go there today, people are working 3 jobs. They're one $500 accident away from disaster. That would explain a little bit of the anger at both parties. The Democrats were part of the 2-decade-long wage freeze, $7.15 an hour. They just sat on their hands. It was a free gift to the corporate sector. Why? Because it's the corporate sector that puts them in office. It's not our $5 and $10 contributions or $100 contributions. So GATT and NAFTA. Anyway, my mind is drying up on the list. But it continued. Oh, Bill Clinton changed the Democratic Party into a neoliberal party. Neoliberalism is the belief that markets are a natural institution, sacred, and should never be regulated or controlled. And the Clinton administration with Larry Summers and Robert Rubin wanted to go after the same big money that the Republicans did. And they did it, and they started deregulating the banks. And that's what led to the economic collapse in 2008, where 16 million people were evicted, had their shit thrown out on the streets in front of their neighbors. Country's still not recovered from that. The liar's loans, the lying of the adjudicating agencies. So I mention all this to show that for the people for whom money is the primary concern, that's what's driving these huge and drastic changes. And for the non-union workers, they woke up every day. They saw the same chipper people on the news with good hair, jocular and joking and laughing and talking. And let's say something about that. Up until Reagan's presidency, there was a law in place, first a regulation, then a law called the Fairness Doctrine. And what it said was that the airwaves belong to the people. Consequently, everything that comes over them should be of interest to the people and of use to the people. And they were so strict that if Jeff was talking badly about me one day on TV, I would be invited the next to rebut what he said. Well, the Reagan and the conservative forces, the Lewis Powell forces that put Reagan in the presidency, they said, oh no, that's a violation of free speech, and they got rid of the Fairness Doctrine. And the next day you had hate radio. You had Rush Limbaugh. You had single-issue right-wing conservative evangelical radio sweeping the Midwest. As these churches were networking, getting lots of money from the Koch brothers, Richard Scaife, Joseph Coors, to make sure everybody got the message, to make sure there were think tanks coming up with ideas, to make sure there were foot soldiers. So now, then Clinton changed the law that used to prevent the agglomeration of TV, radio, and news outlets. Said, no, there's no limits. And we reduced 50 media corporations to 3. So today we have one unified corporate voice on our news. And the political spectrum runs from the center to the right. Unlike the parliaments all over Europe and all over Scandinavia, which have every position from social democrats, left of Bernie Sanders, to right-wing fascism, and they're all arguing, they're all talking, all those ideas are in currency. And out of that, all of our allies manage free health care, free upper education, free higher education, all sorts of stuff we don't, because the corporate sector is never going to allow airtime to go to ideas that might impinge on their profits. So we've really been surrounded. But that doesn't mean that we're helpless. So let me bring this back to Buddhist practice now. So we know all this. We know that there are vast forces that are work pretty much beyond our control. But our state of mind is not beyond our control. That's precisely in our control. And when we find ourselves fretting, if you look closely, you're fretting because there's something you love that's under threat, or you don't like the uncertainty, or you can't bear the loss of this beautiful country, this beautiful planet. What are your grandchildren going to do? But you never knew that. That was a fiction that was based on ideas of certainty and fixity, that everything would just keep going along. In point of fact, we've always been floating in eternity. There's still slavery somewhere in the world. There's still cannibalism somewhere in the world. There's still rapaciousness. There's still violence. We're not getting rid of those things. We can change the proportion. But once you realize that there's no physical object that's under threat, you can let these things come into your awareness and move out. Sure, you can get hit by a bus. Sure, you can be killed by a mugger, but that was always true. To me, what's most important is the more desperate times become, the more people need calm, aware, alert, and kind people around them. And the more panicky people are, the more useful somebody with a wide, spacious view and fearlessness and compassion for other people become. So our practice becomes more and more useful. And if you look at the way Buddhism and interest in Buddhism is spreading, it's not because more people want to make a gold statue of Buddha and bow down to it. It's because somehow the idea has come across that we exist to be helpful, we exist to be kind, we exist to be useful. And one of the uses that we do is we mirror, we model the life of a Buddha in our own life. That's what we do when we walk the Eightfold Path. We model the life of a Buddha. We make of it a living example for other people to see. And if they can see it, they can imitate it. I'll tell you one funny story. When I decided to go into the movies, I was really concerned and nervous. I'd been living at Zen Center for about 6 or 7 years. I'd been a digger during the Haight-Ashbury. We did everything for nothing and anonymously. And I was going to move into this bastion of egocentricity and ambition and vulgarity. And I just didn't know exactly what to do. And I knew I wouldn't have a lot of control over the content of the movies that I would make. But I decided that I could be in control of the way I made the movies. So I made a series of vows with myself that I would show up on time, I would know my lines, I would not compete with my fellows, I would be cheerful, I would try to keep a light working atmosphere on the set, I would treat everybody the same way, the stars down to the littlest PA. And literally, there was never a movie that I made in all 160 where someone of the cast or crew didn't come to me and say, hey, do you have some kind of religion or something? And I said, well, why? What do you mean? They said, I don't know, man. You get along with everybody. You don't fight. You're on time. You do your work. You help other people. You're as nice to me as you are to the star. And I could say, well, yeah, I do. You want a pamphlet? Anyway, so if we're careful and if we look, we can still see that there are places that we can have an effect. I don't know if any of you noticed that on February 28th, there was a nationwide no shopping day from February 28th at midnight, or the 27th at midnight to the 28th at midnight. And I've been very curious to know that it was all over the internet. It was everywhere. It's never been reported. No, not a single news story about it. Well, if you think about it, it's an idea that has a lot of sense because we can control where we spend our money. We can actually, if we understand that we are responsible for what the corporations we support do, we can take the time to look and say, wow, is there an alternative to Amazon? Well, I've found 10, and I'm not very good at the internet. We can try to live on less. The idea of this idea to stop shopping was to cut down the flow of cash to the corporate sector. Nonviolent, peaceful, example setting. I don't know if anyone noticed, but the idea itself is a good idea. In Czechoslovakia, they threw out an oppressive president, put in a playwright, Václav Havel, without a shot being fired. So one of the things that we can do as Buddhists is talk to people we don't know. And as Buddhists, we don't have any standing to judge them. They're made of the same stuff we are. They're an emanation of the universe, just like a housefly. So instead of criticizing them, we can be curious. Why do you think that? Oh, why do you think that? Oh, if I could prove to you such and such, would that change the way you felt? And one of the things I learned in my life, long before I'd been a Buddhist very long, was how relationships change people. I'll tell you another story. My friend Gary Snyder won the Pulitzer Prize in 1975, and Jerry Brown, who was governor then, asked him to run create a state arts council of working artists, which he did, and he asked me to join him. And at that time, I was quite full of myself, and I had a real chip on my shoulder because I'd been a member of a really good theater company called the San Francisco Mime Troupe. We went to New York, we won Obies, we won prizes, we were lauded all over the United States, and we couldn't get a nickel from the San Francisco hotel tax money, which they give out to the arts, the opera, the symphony, and the ballet. And they had us on the cover of their Chamber of Commerce magazine. And we were making $5 a show each, passing the hat, and we were darlings of the left. So I came in with a real chip on my shoulder, and I said, listen, we are going to adopt. I was elected chairman the second year. Gary was the first chairman. I was chairman for 4 years until they passed a law saying I couldn't do it anymore because that was so undiplomatic. Anyway, I said, opera, symphony, and ballet, they've got all the money. They can take care of themselves. We're going to support the community arts. We're going to support the mulch that grows tomatoes and roses in the culture. And I basically divided the state in half. All the big money went, and the boards of directors went with the opera, symphony, and ballet, and all the little people, the voters and stuff, were with me and mine. And we were paralyzed. And Jerry Brown called me and he said, Peter, in a democracy, all boats rise or all boats float. You can't play favorites. And I thought about it and I realized, oh yeah, everybody's paying taxes. Everybody has a right to see their culture represented with tax dollars. And there was one Republican on the Arts Council who became one of my closest friends. And he said, listen, we're having all this fighting and anxiety over $1 million. You're Jerry's boy. Why don't you go to him and ask him to put in $20 million? See what we can do. So Gary Snyder and I did that. We said, you don't have to lift a finger. Just put it in your budget. If we can't raise the money, you can still tell your rich friends that you tried. So we did that. And then I had to go around, I had to eat crow. I had to go to all the operas and the symphonies and the major theaters and the major institutions and apologize and say, look, we've got this wagon now. We've got $20 million in the back of the wagon. And we got all these harnesses for mules. Community, big institutions, little institutions, state agencies, all this stuff. We need you to join a political movement. And they did. And the first year, our budget went from 1 to 5 million. The next year it went to 11. The next year it went to 16. The next year it went to 18. And part of that was me going around to all these conservative senators, paying my respects, getting to know them, talk about hunting, talk about fishing, talk about what we were doing in non-judgmental terms, how we were serving their constituents. And we were not just giving money to artists for making art. We knew the conservatives would never do that. We were hiring artists as creative problem solvers to go into schools and make movies about teenage pregnancy, for dancers to work with senior citizens and help them with movement, to go into prisons, teach non-literate people how to work with leather and do all these things. We had 18 other interagency agreements. And when the time came, the Arts Council was saved by right-wing Republicans who'd come to know and trust us. They'd put senators on the Arts Council and they'd be there 6 months. They'd say, these guys are the real deal. So then at my last finance committee hearing, before the 3 rock-ribbed conservatives, the Mount Rushmore of Central Valley conservatives, just before the meeting started, they reached under the table and they put on hippie headbands to say goodbye to me, say good job. I almost broke into tears. But I learned from that. These guys would ensure that my budget would get through, and then they would vote against me on the record to save their butt because I was a black sheep. They couldn't tell people they were helping me. So I learned from that the strength of relationships. So I learned that going up to people with a non-confrontational, human-to-human affect is a very, very powerful thing. And all you have to do is put a little doubt into people that their idea of you might be a little more spacious than they thought. There was a famous woman who used to go to Trump rallies wearing a "I voted for Biden" shirt, and she had a golden Labrador on a leash. And everybody came up to talk about the dog. Nobody talked about the T-shirt. Everybody wanted to pet the dog. So these are the things, these are the powers that we have as Buddhists. We have the power to control our reflexes. We can stop negative speech at our teeth. We can stop violence from amplifying our muscles. And this is not to be underestimated. Just to sit and honestly listen is a great gift to people that often relaxes them. I saw a take last night, a woman friend of mine who'd been fighting on Facebook for 5 years with this guy. He calls himself the right-wing warriors, and he's just a pure Trumpist. He sent her a note. He said, well, I guess I was wrong. I thought the problem was the left. Now I see the problem's equally as bad as on the right. I don't know what to do. And that's the opening of a conversation. And that possibility exists with anyone at any time. I don't know how many of y'all write letters, but you can certainly make phone calls to Republican legislators. You don't have to say your party affiliation. You can just say, I'm really concerned about this program or that program. So they hear from other people beside MAGA. You can write a civil letter doing the same thing. You can have little coffee clutches and invite everyone. There's a woman in Illinois who runs a group called Red Wine and Blue. This is a great story. Her husband was an operative in Washington who had to move to Illinois, and she didn't want to give up politics, so she started inviting local women to come over and drink wine. All kinds of women, Trump women, right-wing women, left-wing women. It was just a safe space to chat and talk and meet each other. A lot of women would, when they felt safe, they'd say, you know, I voted for Trump. I feel really ashamed of myself, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Trump was on the radio one day, and he was ranting about Cory Booker, you know, the African-American senator. And he was saying, Cory Booker's coming to your neighborhood. He's going to build high rises. He's going to bring black people in. They're going to just overrun it. And this woman was laughing when she told this story. She said, my group went, oh my God, Cory Booker's coming? Where's my lipstick? Let me get my high heels. I mean, these women had a totally different take on this thing. So we just never know. And this not knowing is a very powerful and a very Buddhist way of behaving. Just not knowing. I don't know this person. I don't care if they're wearing a MAGA hat. I don't know who they are. What's going on? And then listen. You'll feel better. You'll say it's not as bad as you think. In some cases, maybe it's worse, but by and large, the more we do this, the more we act to create a cohesive culture, the more we lessen the temperature, and the more we model appropriate behavior that people can see and imitate. I would rather make a sandwich for a hungry person than give a speech about hunger to 10,000 people, because you can imitate my making a sandwich or giving a pair of socks to a homeless person. So I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to just be open. I'll put a bullseye on my forehead, and I'll open it up to questions. I'd love to hear from y'all.
Thanks, Peter. And we've got still got over 100 people, so we can't see everybody. So, you know, waving your actual hand is not going to work so well. If you go down into React, depending on your version of Zoom, you'll be able to find your electronic hand. And we've got most of another half hour. So let's.
Do you mind if I jump up and get a glass of water?
Please do, Peter.
I'll be 2 seconds.
Yeah, we'll stay here. Rob, I see you. Thanks. And you'll be the first one once Peter gets back. What a great group. Thanks. Thank you all for being here today. This is wonderful.
Okay, sorry, folks.
No worries, Peter. We've got a couple of hands up already, so I'm going to call on Rob to go ahead and unmute yourself. And
great. This is Rob bowing in. Peter, thank you for that.
Hi.
Tour de force. One thing that Thich Nhat Hanh has made as a suggestion in many of his books is to write a love letter to your politician, the one who you really have the worst feelings for. So I just want to echo that you're in very good company.
That's a brilliant idea. Thich Nhat Hanh was on every death list in Vietnam.
Yes.
And somehow survived. So I trust anything he says.
I went with him to Vietnam in 2008, and he had worked with the dictatorship of Vietnam for so many years for them to be able to trust him, and for him to be able to be there and to actually give a Dharma talk to the government officials, and in a way that was human to human, spacious, cohesive. It was just a remarkable period of a week or so. But my other question, though, that's an aside, is capitalism will work better if it gets rid of democracy. I think I understood you to say that, and that's where this is all going. I'd like you to say more, just a bit about that. Thank you.
Well, it's bullshit, but that's what these people believe. These people believe that regulations per se are restricting the amount of capital that they can get. But one of the things that they're ignoring is that foreign investments tend to shy away from autocracies. Who wants to invest in a kleptocracy? Who wants to invest in a place where at whim, I mean, didn't you know at the moment that Trump invented tariffs and everybody said this is going to cost the American people a fortune, that the grift was that he would be able to give personal exceptions. He'd be able to say, how much do you like me? And that's exactly what he's doing now. He's giving easements and carve-outs to those people that are coming to him. So at a certain point, that looks what's happening to the stock market. And at a certain point, foreign investment will dry up. So what investors want and what businesses want is regularity and dependability. And one of the things that a nation under the law offers is dependability. And so Trump likes to pose and be a tough guy and sound like he's on top of everything, but it's all operating by whim. Last night, people were begging Elon Musk for, easements. And he said, just call me, give me a call. Well, that's great if you have Elon's number. But if you don't, you're going to be on the side that's losing. So I don't believe that capitalism works better under that capitalism works better without any regulation. And as a matter of fact, the problems that have come about from the lack of regulation. I mean, capitalism has certain built-in problems. Everybody knows that. I mean, Karl Marx figured that out in the 19th century. But most of our European allies, who are certainly serving their people better than we are, have realized that regulations can temper the worst excesses and make sure that the weakest people are protected. And that's where we fall down. We like this Darwinian survival of the fittest, all this macho tough guy stuff, but we're not taking care of the children. We're not taking care of people who are not so educated or not so powerful, and they're just being left behind. And this woman, Karen Stephenson, points out that it's the inequity that seems to be the initial driver of all of these conspiracies and all of this struggle on the part of the working people, what's making them come to support basically the interests of arch capitalists. So I just don't accept their premise.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for your question too, Rob. Molly Scott, I see you've got your hand up. Thanks for doing that.
Where is Molly? I'm looking for you on my little.
Here
Oh,
and
I see you.
with the hippie-looking house.
Like it.
Yeah, well, looks like yours. And I do come from the same timing of culture. And you said probably the most coherent encapsulation of my thought processes around this at this time that I've heard so far. And I've been doing a lot of looking and listening and wondering, how now do we live with the abuses and the assaults and the breakings and the fracturings of structures that long ago we saw the beginning of the collapse and had no way to go except where we went. My question to you, with great gratitude for, again, what I call your coherence, kind of almost a musical term here. What vision do you have from this composite kind of orchestral life that you've lived with many different facets of ways to do and be? What vision, aside from what we do as personal persons or whatever we are and are not, do you have for ways that there might be some kind of more some kind of emergent social contract and ways that we can live as people that has a superstructure as well as an infrastructure and a substructure that will flex enough to allow whoever the us is to go forward? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, actually. It's the real question. So you can see that on some level, everything we're talking about pivots on a spiritual dimension.
Yes.
If you're locked into self and other, you're locked into an idea that there's going to be one winner, especially if the other is something that you're distancing yourself from. Here we all are. There's 100 people here, right? And everybody's listening politely. Everybody's respecting each other's space. Everybody is joined for whatever their own reasons are, but they know that their neighbors are force multipliers. You know that 100 people has more of a public footprint than one person very often. I mean, with exception of Jesus and Moses and Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama. So my vision in my neighborhood, I live in a place where 3 dead-end roads, about 50 houses, dead end on an easement where I walk. My dogs don't have to be on leashes. And in the 10 years I've been here, we've united as one neighborhood. We all have walkie-talkies for emergencies. We were all evacuated several times for fire. We have lists of the old people that need to be looked after in an emergency. We meet usually on Fridays down at somebody's house outside, bring up lawn chairs. It started during COVID, social distancing, drinking wine and talking and getting to know one another. We have annual picnics once or twice a year, and it's an extremely cohesive place. And I sense that this is happening in a lot of other places as well. I used to live in Mill Valley for 40 years, which is a pretty affluent little community. I barely knew my neighbors. I knew the one neighbor on my uphill side, and we didn't get along. And living out here in Sebastopol is a much different situation. So my vision is basically a vision of listening and tolerance and participating in the group that's going to demand the infrastructure that we need to support ourselves and has the clarity of vision to communicate why subterranean attempts to ruin our cohesiveness or weaken our resources need to be exposed and need to fail. So it's not going to happen overnight, but here's 100 people. And there are groups of these 100 people all over the world, actually. Paul Hawken wrote a book on the environment where he found there were 1 million little environmental groups working, save Puta Creek, save this one, save that one. And in aggregate, it was the largest social organization in the world. So I think that local work and local coherence that you can get to, you can walk to, you can meet your neighbors, you can do little favors for them. Listen, not everybody's going to think the same way, but start building cohesive resources of safety, storing up stuff if you're afraid, storing food, storing water, doing chores for people who are too old. I think that's something you can do without waiting. And I think the politics, I'm not clear yet what's going to work, except I'm pretty certain that Trump is going to burn so many people that he could wind up upside down like Mussolini. I mean, because the people who are getting most hurt are his voters. When he cuts Medicaid in Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri, Florida, these are all the people with the guns, and these are all the people that need this stuff. And they did a Hail Mary pass hoping Trump was going to save them. And because Trump was presented to them through lots of money and lots of resources, but that stuff's not going to hold up. And that stuff may be beyond our capacity to change. What we have to do, okay, let me just take a parenthesis. Let me say something about protest for a minute.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I was asked to go to Harvard to teach on the theater of protest. And what I wanted to address was why so many protests wind up as Republican campaign videos. And it's germane to what you asked me. They wind up as campaign videos because we're not certain who the audience is. We think that when we protest, the audience is our local politician. We think the audience is the local police. We think the audience is something in power. And it's always wrong. There's only one audience, which is the American people, who are looking to find out who's reliable and who they can trust. And if you protest within certain parameters, you'll demonstrate that fidelity and that trust to them. So I always suggest, first of all, let women organize it. It'll be more expansive. It'll be softer. It'll be more cohesive. It'll just work better. Let women organize it. Pick proctors. Give yellow vests and whistles to proctors whose only job is to look for violence. And at the first sign of violence or discord, they blow the whistle and all the protesters sit down. Let the police take out their angst on the people who are burning local villages, stores, and breaking windows and disrupt. Come dressed like you'd go to church. It's hard to date a ruffian if you're nicely dressed. Protest in silence. Let your signs do the talking. Go home at night. So these are the kinds of things that when people are watching, when they see a guy get jumped in an elevator by 3 women, with whom I identified, by the way, during the Kavanaugh hearings. But for a lot of the people like I grew up with, they were shocked that 3 people would jump a senator in an elevator and be rude to him. So it's counterproductive. They felt good, but the people watching thought, oh, I wouldn't do it that way. So when you're talking and when you're protesting and when you want to do things, you have to remember that what you're seeking is power at the ballot box. And that means you're applying to the American people for permission to act in their name. And that means you can't be farther ahead than a lot of the conservatives. And I've often felt that it was a big mistake. Like the Democrats could have just said, we are for the party of civil liberties. You don't have to discriminate what they are. You don't have to tell a lot of Midwesterners about acts they'd rather not know about. You can just say civil liberties. But by breaking it down into trans people and gay people and this and that, you become campaign videos because you're using the values and sophistication of coastal intellectuals and you're trying to win over the Midwest. You don't have to abandon your values, but you have to talk to people in other parts of the country in ways that they can accept and understand. And I think that's one of the faults that we made in the 60s. And it's one of the problems that the Democrats are making now, building mosaics of subsets of people instead of just saying all people, civil liberties, who you sleep with, who you marry, that's your business. Anyway, there's a tendency for people to be, who are professional about this, to be minute in their attention and to forget you're trying to bring millions of people with you and you can't be out over your skis. So if we're looking to build infrastructure, if you're looking to build power, you have to find a mode of address that's actually inclusive and doesn't embarrass other people that may not be as sophisticated as you.
Brilliant. Back to you. Thank you so much.
Molly, thanks for that great question. That really brought out a lot for us all. So let's keep moving here. Peter, Edward, I see your hand, and then after Edward, Jody's got her hand up. But Edward, go ahead and unmute.
I'm looking for Edward.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Oh, hi, man. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I gotta say, I'm a huge fan of your voiceover stuff, like for years.
Thank
I could ask you like 40 questions about that, but I'm not gonna. I have it written down, my questions. So this has happened a couple of times in your life, just from what I've read about you, right? But when you're in the commune for 7 years, that story with your dad, I thought was really good. Um, when you were there, okay, I'll put it shortly. How did you become confident in yourself and in the future in moments of huge uncertainty? Because it seems like it has been a couple of times in your life, and I think in all of our lives too, where you're really not sure what's happening next. You've talked about like America as a whole for sure, and that was really awesome. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious as to like what happens for you internally when you're about to make those big jumps.
Well, so I was a heroin addict for 10 years. So that gives you some idea of what was going on in me. It was not containable. I had a lot of trauma growing up as a child. So what? I mean, I'm not begging for mercy, but all of those things take a long time to work out. My father was extremely violent. I spent a long time running around with the Hells Angels, trying to come to terms with violence and what it meant and where I stood with it. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in those days at all. I had confidence in some things. I had confidence in my sense of being articulate. And I had pretty good confidence and sense of being a thinker. But I thought a lot of stuff that was just bullshit. I mean, really, it's like, and so I think one of the things is that age burns a lot of stuff out of you. When my dad died, it was a huge shock. I just didn't believe he could die. He was too big a force in the universe. And several years later, I was in the movie business and just doing moderately well, and all sorts of people wanted my business. And he had taught me nothing about business. He raised me like a little Jewish prince, to be like, he literally said to me, you'll teach at Harvard and I'll give you money so you can get your suits made in London and you can have handmade fly rods and Purdy shotguns. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, I didn't know anything. And so that's why I was a digger. The diggers didn't use money, right? So all of a sudden I was making money. I did not have a father. I did not have one person on my side that could maybe guide me and help me. And I was not confident at all. I was quite fearful, and it made me kind of assiduous in studying and looking for clues for people. Like, I went to visit 5 accountants, and in every office I went to, I felt like a poor relative. I mean, there were paintings on the wall that were worth more than my house. And finally, I got to this guy who's been my accountant for 45 years. He said, well, I don't know. I have this old-fashioned idea that I should make my clients wealthy. I'm doing well enough. He said, I bought my building, so it keeps my expenses down. I charge for my bookkeepers, I charge $40 an hour. For the few times you use me, I charge $100. And this guy has saved my life innumerable times. So I interviewed 5 or 6 people. When I quit shooting heroin and I just started in the Zen Center, I went into therapy. I knew I was a twisted puppy. And I interviewed about 6 therapists, and I found one that I really thought I'd like to be like. And I got him to give me a sliding scale. I worked with him twice a week for 2 years. He died. I started all over again. And I stayed in therapy, and I stayed in Zen Center for the next 8 or 9 years. So one of the things that gives you confidence is Zazen. You get comfortable with not knowing. You get comfortable with not knowing what's going to come up next. And you become less fearful of saying, I don't know. Looking like an idiot. What's going to happen? They're going to think I'm an idiot? It's like calling an empty bamboo tube an idiot. Well, I don't care. Call me an idiot. I know I'm an idiot. So, but I'm an idiot that listens and tries not to make the same mistake twice. So, if you talk to like Green Berets or you talk to SEAL people, they'll tell you they're scared witless. But what they learn how to do is to operate through their fear anyway. So there are times where you just have to operate without confidence. You do your best. I've read the set. I'm going to commit to this. And if you're wrong, you'll learn. And if you're right, you'll learn. So, I don't know, are you in your 30s?
I'm 40.
40. Okay. Well, I got my first job in the movies at 39, just 2 months before I was 40. Right. And so I've never made more than $2,000 a year. So you got a long haul. I'm 83. And you'll be amazed how much you learn if you just keep being honest and saying what you don't know and accepting that you don't know. Things work out because the universe wants you here or you wouldn't be here.
Yeah. I really needed to hear that. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Good, good.
Thanks, Edward. And we're glad you're here, Edward, for sure.
Thanks.
Jody, you've got your hand up, and Kathy, after that, if we can keep these a little bit tight.
I'm sorry, that's me rambling on and on.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. It's okay. We're here to listen to you. So maybe we'll get both Jody and Kathy. And Jody, go ahead and open your mic.
I see you, Jody. Or you're muted. Go down the bottom left and click on your microphone. There you go.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Just wanted to say I'm from Central Florida, raised in Massachusetts, and just recently discovered Peter Coyote and found out that you're the voice I love, and I bought your poetry. I just would
thank you so much.
I just like to maybe add to some of your recent points. There's using old age. Now, you're not all old, but mostly you look white, this group. As someone, I decided to celebrate turning 80. I was widowed a few years ago. I decided I would make myself into living in the South now, really wanting to understand Black history, wanting to understand lynchings. Essentially, I approached the arts. Everything came in little bits and pieces as part of a spiritual quest. The connection, I think, to what we're saying today is that I decided by being somewhat older and by being widowed, I could sort of say, hey, I'm overwhelmed by life. I would approach almost random strangers. Anyway, I'd say, tell me, did you ever feel lonely? Did you ever feel hurt? Did you ever feel, sexy when you're 78 and to do with it? All sorts of things. I think I've found enormous success in making friends across all kinds of political, racial, age barriers, class barriers, by just sort of saying, hey, I'm at a point in my life where all sorts of things are confusing me and overwhelming me and also exciting me. What people will share, and then the basis that becomes for some unusual friendships, or even if not a friendship, the miracle of just a few minutes with somebody and you feel there's a connection there, and the business about change, transformation, energy. There's a spark that happens. I have very strong political feelings. I have very strong intellectual feelings. I just try to set that aside because, very frankly, that's not what's going to make the difference. It is, I truly believe, the human connection and the humility in asking other people to share and to be vulnerable. Because I always kind of come across as very confident, knowledgeable, high IQ, privileged, all that stuff. Just try to set that aside because that isn't the whole me at all. And I find I get much better. So anyway, just wanted to kind of share that with the thought that by pure chance, I wanted to mourn Gene Hackman, who died just a few days ago, of course, as we know. I'd never seen the movie Mississippi Burning. Came out in 1988. I would simply throw that out as an example of maybe see what Peter thinks on this, but Gene Hackman's persona. He's as against the FBI person by the book. Talk about trying to get folks to understand where you're coming from and communicate. So just curious if anyone might agree that Mississippi Burning is an example of perhaps some of the kinds of behaviors that get people talking to each other in a tough time. Let me tell you, that was a tough time. So sorry to take so long. But Peter, thanks very much. I think you're helping a lot of people.
Thanks, Jody. Well, I'll
Appreciate
tell
it.
you two things
Bye-bye.
that might surprise you. When I was born in 1941, and Jews were not white people. I couldn't go to the country club with my friends when they went swimming. There were schools I couldn't go to. I'm not saying this was great suffering, but I'm just saying I understood what whiteness was. And then I also had a great stroke of luck on a kind of disaster. My mother had a catastrophic nervous breakdown when I was about 3.5. And my father's sister sent her 17-year-old black housekeeper in to take care of us. And she was a brilliant young girl from North Carolina, Henderson, North Carolina. And she just picked up all the trouble in the household and became a safe refuge for my sister and I. And she and her community raised me till I was 14. And I buried her 2 years ago. We were never apart. She's my black mother. And when I go to North Carolina, there's about 15 black people there that consider me kin. And I learned about whiteness very, very early on, 7, 8 years old, going to town with my black mother or with my white mother and seeing the way we were treated. So to me, you know, I don't know if y'all have read the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, but it's actually a very brilliant book, and it explains far more than racism does about how black people have been forced into the lowest caste in the United States, just like in India, where everybody's the same race. You still have Brahmins and you have Dalits who must walk 12 paces behind, can't swim in the same pool. It's the same kind of hierarchy of exclusion. It's just part of the human mind, the way we compare and contrast things. And if you never see that that's illusory, if you never understand that it's meaningless, I mean, a pygmy can interbreed with a white woman from Massachusetts. We're the same species. That's the definition of species. A raccoon can't breed with a bear. They're related. So I think that you're doing a great thing. I've done this as a matter of course my whole life. To be quite honest, I have no anxiety around black people at all. I have anxiety around white people because I know what they're capable of. I've seen what they're capable of. So that's just one of my little hang-ups that I have to work on, but they did me a great service. My house was full of black people in the kitchen, laughing and singing. My mother would be out drinking scotch in the living room and playing solitaire. Where do you think I wanted to be? I wanted to be with the people who talk to me, teach me to sing and dance and listen to the conversations and ask me what I thought. So it was a great gift of what could have been a catastrophic situation.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks for the plug for Cast. I'll double plug it. It's a great book. Ava DuVernay made a great movie about.
Yeah, she sure did.
Yeah, about that. Kathy, we're gonna get you in here. Go ahead and open your mic and share with us.
Thank you so much, Duff and Peter. I'm very curious these days about anger. It's one of the 3 poisons, but with the fire hose, every drop of water caused me to be enraged. And I'm a Buddhist. I've been dealing with it, but I'm just curious of your thoughts. Anger.
I don't understand. What's the fire hose metaphor?
Oh, the fire hose is the news feed these days about what's happening in our country.
Oh, yeah. Well, so Here we go. In from 1948, first televisions, back up. The FCC divided up the broadcast bands, and they set a limited number of frequencies. And because they were limited, they were extremely valuable. And because they were the public airwaves, they couldn't sell them. So they leased them to advertisers. And the advertisers created the programming that would keep people's eyeballs in front of the television to see their ads. But with the news, you couldn't make value that way. Everybody understood it was sort of weird for the news to be sponsored by something. It would just look biased. So what Edward Paley of CBS News did was he created the value by excellence. And he got Edward R. Murrow, and he got guys like Edward R. Murrow, Walter Cronkite. And at that time, Huntley and Brinkley, Barbara Walters, the news was the fact base that the entire country used for discussing public policy. There were only three. So in 1968, 60 Minutes came out. And 60 Minutes made so much money, even on old, antiquated news stories that made them entertaining, that every media corporation went to their news division and said, y'all have to contribute to profits. And from the day they did that, it changed the strategy of the news. The strategy of the news was no longer the fairness doctrine and discussing important issues in an open-handed and even-handed way. The strategy became keeping your eyeballs in front of the screen for the ads of the sponsors. So to do that, they got younger, sexier, glibber, more stylish people who were comfortable laughing and joking every day. They have 5 minutes of news, they have 15 minutes of opinions, and they have 28 minutes of ads. Ads you'll never see. If you go live in Europe, you will not see medicine advertised on television, because it's just a trick bag to get you to ask your doctor, well, what about Ambisa, or what about this one or that one? So we have to accept the fact that we have sold without a whimper our public airwaves to the corporate sector. So the corporate sector strategy for keeping you in front of the news is keeping you upset. It creates every story as only 2 possibilities instead of maybe 10. There are good guys, there are bad guys. Everything is presented like a horse race. Who's winning, who's losing, what might happen, what might not happen. But the strategy is to keep you watching. So what I do is I watch the BBC, or I watch Al Jazeera. I watch someplace that's not going to be sponsored. I watch MSNBC, I watch CNN, but they have the same strategy. The CNN's a little less hysterical, a little less interesting to me than MSNBC, but it's all the same thing. It's the center to the right. There is no real left wing on corporate news. You never saw Howard Zinn. You never see Noam Chomsky. You never see Michael or Christian Parenti. You never see real intellectual men and women arguing for the left. So the left is still allowed to be, the socialist, extremist, wackadoo, like these guys on the right wing aren't bad enough. So I'd say stop watching. Read books. Go to something without ads, like the BBC, which is not hysterical.
Peter, the news that Medicaid might be taken away from my former patients because I'm a healthcare provider, that's real. Whether I get it from reading somebody I trust or whether I get it from broadcast news. And I get angry when I hear those things.
I understand, but
yeah, and that's more what I was hoping to hear from you. Thank you.
I see. Okay, I answered the wrong question. I'm sorry, but
it's okay.
My wife's a retired nurse. She ran all the public nursing in Napa County, and that's beyond your control. I'm sorry to say it. I'm not saying you shouldn't care, but it is beyond your control. What's in your control is to take care of somebody that you know that you can help. What's in your control is to write a letter to the newspaper or get a lot of people. I got a newspaper that publishes everything I write now. I've gone to see the editor. We've become friends. I can use this little town. I mean, Santa Rosa, California, but it's a multiplier. So the other thing is about your anger, what the Dalai Lama would say is turn that anger into a dagger and stab your ego with it. Because the part of you that feels like you should be powerful and able to fix this is the part that's suffering. And the Dalai Lama wants to liberate you from that. That anger is just, it's a weapon. So use it against something that will make you expansive and open. And
I love that.
all those people who are doing this to your patients are all fearful, frightened, powerless, runty little puppies. You know, their life is not much. You watch Donald Trump walk down the steps of a plane and you see a doddery old man who's afraid of being humiliated on television. Those people are living their own punishment. So you just want to get rid of that part of you that's holding out to be the crusader or the defender. Just let it go through you like a bamboo tube and then do something that you can do.
Wonderful. Well, Peter, thank you. And thank you for that question too. That was a great prompt. And we are at the end of our time. We are actually over our time. Magically, we did not turn into pumpkins. So now we know that this works. Peter, thanks for that last comment of yours. I think that's a great place for us to end. I want to remind everybody, we record all of these programs, and it takes us a few days to cook it and get it up onto the website, but it will be on our website if you want to watch again or amplify, like Peter has talked about, multiply, and share with your friends. It's up there for free. So
I'd appreciate if you'd send me a link, Jeff.
We will do that, Peter. And Peter, you've got full use of it, however you'd like. So we always follow up that way. So Peter, thank you very, very much. I think we could probably do this. I can do this another couple of hours. I might need a bologna sandwich, but
well, another time. If I haven't put everybody to sleep, I'd be happy to come back sometime.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it. And
thanks so much.
One of our traditions here is at the end, everybody open your mic and let's wish each other peace and calm and serenity and action. Let's take action.
I'll tell you what, I'll say the meta prayer to everyone. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be free from suffering. May I be happy and at peace. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be free from suffering. May you be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace.